Okay, so mine has this, but I'm going to type it in wrong. Okay, you may not be able to notice that this is wrong. But here's what I want you to do is look at mine. Don't hit graph on yours. Just look at mine. Watch mine because I want you to see what could happen. Okay, when I hit graph, notice it went straight to an error message. Don't sit there and go to y equals and clear it out. Don't do that. It's a syntax error, which means you have like 2 plus signs in the middle, or where it should be just 1. It's just a typo. So I'm going to hit to go to it, and notice it's flashing over this. This tells me that I didn't use my negative sign. I used the subtraction sign there. So I can use my negative, it made it smaller, and I didn't have to type that whole thing over again, because that's a pain. All right. All right. Any questions on how to have this typed in? All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit graph. Now, your graph should look something like this. So we need to find out the steps on how to do this. I mean, for those of you that were here on Friday, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to y equals, because I did not put that in your notes. Okay. You're going to hit your second button. Then you're going to hit trace, which changes that to calculate when you hit second. And then you're going to pick between minimum or maximum. Okay. If it's a minimum, you hit 3. If it's maximum, you hit 4. And then you got to set your boundaries. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We have this, and you didn't even have to graph it first. You can go straight to second trace. So we're going to hit our second button, which is our blue button, and we're going to hit trace. And the first one we're going to find is this maximum right here. Okay, we're going to find that maximum. It's a hill, so it's a maximum, so we're going to hit 4. And we're going to find, we need that cursor. It says left bound, so that cursor has to be on the right-hand side of that. So it needs to be somewhere on the left-hand side. I don't know if I said left or right, but somewhere on the left-hand side of that hill. And I don't care where it's at. It can be way down there. It doesn't matter. And hit enter. Then it asks for the right bound. So you got to be on the right-hand side of that hill and hit enter. And then I don't care where you put it. For guess, you can just hit it. I noticed I didn't even move mine. I can hit enter again, or I can place it up here. It doesn't matter. And it gives me my point. Okay. Now, your directions in your notes do not tell you what to do as far as what to round it to. I'm just saying, I told you to round to the nearest 10th. It just makes it easier for me. Okay. So this was the point negative 0.6, comma 3.9. Okay. Now we're going to find this minimum, which is on the board. If you see that, you see the little squiggly things. When you hit set, you have to go through the steps again. You have to hit second, calc, and now you're going to hit 3 for minimum. The cursor has to be on the left-hand side of that valley, as I call it, for the left bound. You hit, so you place this cursor on the left-hand side of that valley somewhere. It doesn't really matter. Hit enter. Then you put it on the right-hand side, hit enter. And then if you want to put it down here, it's fine, or you could just hit enter again. I'm really bad about not moving it, and hit enter. Now, guys, your minimum and maximum may be a little bit different than mine, somewhere down in here. That's just because of where you placed your cursor to begin with on that left bound and right bound. But all of ours will round to the same thing. So in this one, it was 0.2 and 2.9. And then we have another maximum over here, second calc 4 for maximum. Put it on the right-hand side, somewhere on there. Put it, I'm sorry, the left-hand side. Now we put it on the right-hand side. And now we go graph, or hit it again for our guess. 0.9, and see this number? I told you to round it to the nearest 10. If you put 4, I'm not going to count it wrong, but the rule of thumb is if you're rounding something to the 10th position and it's going to round to 0, you put 4.0, okay? Because this just tells the reader that it wasn't exactly 4. We rounded it, okay? So that was those answers. All right, any questions on that? All right. Now we're going to go to homework 12. Homework 12 is going to take us a couple of days to get through. And I'm hoping we'll get done with it on Wednesday. It's a pretty long section, okay? So here's what we're going to do. Let me take a roll real quick. Okay, function computation. The following functions allow us to add, subtract, multiply, and divide functions using the arithmetic we already know for real numbers. All right, so this is a pretty easy section as far as telling you what it is, okay? This says f plus g of x, that means you take the function x, f of x, and you add it to g of x. This tells you to subtract the two functions, multiply the two functions, and divide the two functions. The only thing you have to be careful about is when you divide. Because again, we have two rules. Two rules are, and they're on the board over there on the far right. See where it says can't? You can't, number 1, divide by 0. Number 2, take square root of a negative number. Those are the two things I will ask all semester long that you cannot do. I'll say, what are the two things you can't do? And you're going to say divide by 0, take a square root of a negative number. Okay, as I said, well, so you might want to write that in your notes someplace and star it, put a square around, a box around it, whatever. Okay, so now let's work it. When you have this right here, first of all, it says f of x is this function, g of x is this one, and h of x is this one. Evaluate the following. We are going to take our f of x function, hold on a second, and we are going to subtract our g of x. So this is pretty easy. All you're going to do is you are going to take your f of x function, which is x squared minus 3x plus 1. That's your f of x function. And you're going to subtract your g of x function. And your g of x function is this. Oh, hold on. Sorry. They gave us -8, didn't they? Okay. That's racist. I was like, man, I don't remember doing this one. Okay. Our x is -8. Sorry about that. Okay, so what we have to find is first, let's find f of -8. And then let's find g of -8. And then all you have to do is subtract the two. So when I write this, you need to know this for the rest of the semester. This is telling you that x is -8. So you take your f function, and wherever you see x, you plug in -8. So you're going to say -8 squared minus 3 times your -8 plus 1. So you take out x and put in -8. When you do that, however it is you do that, by hand, by calculator, or whatever, you are going to get 64 plus 24. So it's going to give us 89. Now let's plug in our -8, because again, this tells us that x equals -8. So you take your g function, which is this, the square root of 8 minus whatever x is. So you're going to have 8 minus, and you're going to take out your x and you're going to plug in a -8. That's going to give us the square root of 16, right? Which gives us 4. The double negative becomes positive. All right, now that you found both of them, all you have to do is now subtract them. You said your f of -8 is 89. Your g of -8 was 4, so 89 minus 4 is going to give us 85. Wish I had more room on these worksheets, but I don't. Right here, you're going to say g of 0, get that answer, and then multiply, or find h of 0, get that answer, and then multiply the two together. Remember, when you're finding g of 0, this means x is equal to 0. So you take that g function and you take out your x and you plug in a 0 for it. So you get the square root of 8. Now here's the problem. Some of you are going to leave your answer that way. But the square root of 8 can be simplified. You can't forget about that just because we moved on to another section. You can rewrite this as the square root of 4 times 2. 4 is a perfect square. So I can pull out a 2 right here. So this simplifies as 2 times the square root of 2. Now find h of 0. You do that. Again, you should have gotten your x is 0 when you plug in 0 for your h into your h of x. You get 2 over 0 plus 1, which is 2 over 1, which is 2. Now, what did this tell you to do with these two answers? Multiply them, right. So when you're doing this g times h of 0, you're actually saying 2 times the square root of 2, or 2 square root of 2 times 2. Either way, it doesn't really matter. I just like it written like this way because now I get 4 times the square root of 2. So even if I had these two things switched, I still would get 4 times the square root of 2. You can multiply unlike radicals, you just can't add or subtract. Okay, h of -1. Well, we don't have to do anything new. We just got to substitute. This is telling me take out my x and put in a -1. So I'm going to say 2 over -1 plus 1. What do I get on the bottom there? 0. Oops, there we go. But that's a no-no, right? What is our answer? What is it?
Would you put it as a solution? Or
It will probably have a word that I
is it
do.
undefined?
There you go. There you go. I don't know. It depends. You'd have to read your instructions, but usually when you have 0 underneath, they want the word undefined. It might say it's undefined when x equals -1. They might be nice and say that. Okay. I expect you, tells me that there's that much room between that U and that D. I just expect you to know that word for that. Okay. So, okay. Now, gets a little bit harder here only because we're talking about domain, right? Domain takes practice. I know it takes practice because I had to practice it. Okay. So before we get to the, and this problem is cut off. So I'm just gonna say that it is R minus T. Yeah. But here's the thing. We need to, before getting started, we need to find our domain for all of these. Meaning, you remember doing restrictions? Okay. That's just telling me what X can't be. But domain says what X can be. Now, the only two things that you have to worry about are the two things that are written on the board down there. The first one, can't divide by 0. Second one, can't take square root of a negative number. So when we're talking, if you're not breaking any of those rules, your answer is all real numbers, your domain. So like right here, we are not dividing by 0, nor are we taking a square root. We can't break any quote math laws. So our domain is all real numbers, meaning X can be any number out there. I don't like the way that's written. Look at S of X. Hold on just a second. Okay. What can't X be here?
Yeah.
0. We're dividing by a letter. So that means now we got to worry about it. Okay. And X can't be equal to 0. But I don't want to know what X can't be. You have to write it what it can be in interval notation. And here's how you write that. It can be anywhere from negative infinity up to 0. How do I take 0 out of it? Parentheses or bracket? Parentheses. That is going to take you, and I'll do this, show you this in just a second, how you can do this. That takes you to the left-hand side of 0. Well, you also have the right-hand side of 0. Starting at 0, I use parentheses, and I go to infinity. That is the domain for that second one. Now, how can I do that? Well, if you put it on a number line, here is 0. Right there is an open circle because it's not allowed. Well, it can be all of these numbers, and it can be all of these numbers. Well, if you're looking at this, to do interval notation of that part right there, you would say negative infinity to 0, and to take it out because it's an open circle, you put a parenthesis. If it was a filled in circle and it was okay for it to be 0, you'd put a bracket. Then to do this side, you would say parentheses 0 to infinity. And the only thing you have to do, oops, those are kind of low on, is just put a union between it, because it can be this or it can be this. Okay. All right. Now, here, are we dividing by 0? Or are we taking the square root? No. So we're not doing either of those, so it's all real numbers. Okay. Because here's the thing. It's negative infinity to infinity. You can't forget about your beginning ones. Okay. I don't care what you do, whether you add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Like here, you have to do it if you're using this one. 0 will, you got to take out 0. Okay. I don't care what your answer ends up to be. The only thing is what we're checking for is it starts here, but do we need to add any, take out anything? And I'll show you a problem like that in just a minute. So right now we're going to take our R of X and we're going to subtract our T of X. Okay. This is what I started to do up top, which would have been fine, and then plugged in -8, but the way I did it up top was easier. So I am going to take out my R of X, or I'm going to replace it with its function. So my R of X was this X squared plus 8. And I'm going to subtract my T of X. Well, my T of X was X plus 4. So now I have to simplify. What happens to all the signs after the parentheses or after the subtraction sign? Right. Exactly. All the signs change. You got to distribute that -x. This first one stay the same, x squared plus 8. Then you have minus x minus 4. Now all we got to do is simplify this, so we get x squared minus x plus 4. Because I can combine this and this. Okay, that is my new function. That is my new function called r minus t of x. Okay, well, are we breaking any math laws? Are we dividing by 0? No. Are we taking square root of a number, negative number? No. So it stays. This was all real numbers. This was all real numbers. So is this. So my domain is negative infinity to infinity. So it started it and it ended it. Okay, so let's look at this. This is division. We're going to take our r of x and divide it by our t of x. Okay, well, my r of x, the domain is negative infinity to infinity. My t of x is negative infinity to infinity. Okay, so now we don't have any restrictions, but now let's look at it. We have r of x, which is x squared plus 8. Our t of x is x plus 4. That is our new function, r divided by t of x, because nothing will simplify there. But now do we have a new domain? Is there a number we have to worry about? If we make x -4, then our denominator is 0. We're dividing, so we have to worry about the 0 in the denominator. So that tells me this x can't be equal to -4. Because if it is, this gives me 0. Now that's a restriction. I need to write it as what it can be, not what it can't be. Just like with the 0, it can be negative infinity up to -4. Then use a parenthesis. Then it starts from -4 and it goes to infinity. That's how you take out -4. So again, if you put it on a number line, because some of you have to do that, you would do this. Here's an open circle. It would be everything this way and everything this way. And that's how you go negative infinity up to -4, parentheses, union. That's to the left. To the right, it would be parentheses -4 to infinity. The parentheses is what it doesn't take it. If it's a bracket, it is allowed. Okay, and this last one is multiplication. You are going to take your s of x and you're going to multiply it by your t of x. In this particular case, our s of x is 2 over x. Now, by the way, we're using s, right? I don't care what our answer ends up to be. It doesn't matter. But I'm telling you, 0 is a restriction. It can't equal 0 because of the beginning. You can't exclude it. It will always be there. But we're going to take our s of x and which is 2 over x, and multiply it by our x plus 4. And that's just really over 1. So you can have this as 2 different answers. Me, I would just say 2 times the quantity of x plus 4. all over x. But if you want, you can put 2x plus 8 over x. But you don't have to. So I'm just going to leave it like that. That is our new function, s times t of x. Okay. And again, you could have 2x plus 8. But still, it was 0, right, to begin with? X couldn't equal 0. Do we have any new ones, or is x still can't be equal to 0? Still can't, right? So we didn't add anything to it. So we're going to go negative infinity to 0 and 0 to infinity is the domain. Okay? Any question? Domain takes practice, guys. It really does. Okay. Word problem combining two functions. This one's a pretty easy one. We got Jane and her husband are each starting a savings plan. Jane will initially set aside $750, then add $135 every month to the savings. The amount A in dollars saved this way is given by this function. Okay, $750 plus $135 per month, where N is the number of months she's saving. Her husband, however, will not set an initial amount aside, but will add $585 to the savings every month. The amount B in dollars saved using this plan is given by B equals 585 N. Again, N is our months. Let T total amount in dollars saved using both plans combined. Write an equation relating T to N. Simplify your answer as much as possible. Okay, so what this is saying is we're going to take both their money and add them together, right? So we're going to take our total. We're going to take Jane's and add it to her husband's money. So it's the A function plus the B function. So we're going to take our A function of $750 plus 135 N. And we're going to add it to our B function of 585 N. I just put them in parentheses so that you could see my A function plus my B function. You don't really need it with addition. So now all you have to do is add 135 plus 585. Is it 720? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was doing it the math in my head. And it's Monday. So you want to check. I didn't do it on calculator. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go on to the next section of this. Or okay. Next page. All right. If you guys are taking 1130 for your science, you won't use a quotient function or a difference quotient function after this class. Any of you taking business calculus, the 1580 or 1850, whatever that number? Anyone? Okay. And some of you don't know. So if you are going to take another math class after this, you'll see it again. Okay. But for my class, you will see it on the test and you will see it on the final. So, okay. So here's what we're talking about. The average rate of change between P and Q is the slope of the secant line, and it's given like this, okay? The expression, this here, is called the difference quotient because it just comes from this stuff up here, okay? It comes from this diagram. Now, for you guys, here's what you're going to do. This is the difference quotient. That is it. It will be given to you. It's not something that you have to memorize, okay? The two things that'll be given to you is this in the directions, and it will give you a function. So look right here. In this problem, the function is this. in the second function, problem, the function's this. So it's fine. You're just gonna, they give you an original function that, and you'll use that. Okay. So when you do this problem, I'm gonna zoom this in, you all see. If these were numbers, you would take that number and subtract them. And then you divide it by 8, or what, I'm sorry, h, whatever that number is, okay? So here's what we have to do. We have to take this original function and find that part there first. That's our first step. Our second step is take what I have here and subtract my original function from it and get that whole answer. It gives us our whole top. And then the last step is to divide by h. So here's what you're going to see. You're going to have step 1. You are going to find f of x plus h. You're just going to do this part here first. And you're going to get your answer. Step 2, we'll say, take your answer from step 1, which is f of x plus h, and subtract f of x from it. That's going to give us the whole top to this. And then the last step is divide by h. You take your answer from step 2 and you just divide it by h. And it gives us our whole answer to this problem. Okay, but I will tell you, step 1 is easy, but it gives students the hardest time. Now think about this. I'm going to erase this, so don't write this. If I said f of 2, what is x equal to? 2, right? If I said f of negative 1, this is just telling you that x is negative 1. If I said f of 0, it is just telling you that x is equal to 0. Well, here, this is just telling you that x is equal to x plus h. It's our input. Here, this was our input. Here, this was our input. Here, this was our input. Okay. So what do we input it into? The original function. Here is our function. We're now finding f of x plus h. So what you do is you take out your x and replace it with your input. You say 5 times x plus h minus 2. That there's the hardest part to this whole thing. If you can get past that, you're home free. Because now this just gives us 5x plus 5h minus 2. Was that hard? And okay, what this next step is telling you is to take your answer from step 1, which is this, and subtract your original function from it, which is this. Okay, we're going to take this and subtract this because that's what that's saying. So we are going to take our f of x plus h, well, hold on, our f of x plus h, which is 5x plus 5h minus 2. And you subtract the f of x. Well, if you look at f of x, it tells you that it's 5x minus 2. So now, okay, this was your answer from step 1. And now this is what they gave you to begin with. That's all you're doing is subtracting those two. Be careful, because what happens to our signs after that minus sign? This 5x becomes negative. Some of you are missing that part. This -2 becomes a +2. For some reason, you get that, but you miss that original 5x's minus. Okay, now watch what happens. This is the part I like because things start canceling out. Your 5x's cancel and your 2's are canceled. So in this particular problem, all we have is 5h. Well, now in step 3, you're almost done. Step 3 is you take the answer from step 2, which is this whole top part. Okay, this here is that whole step 2, which we found to be 5h. And you divide it by h. And we get 5 for our answer. And you're done. Now, the reason I find that this is hard for students, and let's face it, how many of you try to skip steps? Me too, right? This is a process. You really don't need to skip steps, okay? Because let's face it, that problem, pretty easy. This next problem's harder, and I'm going to show you why. On your paper, before we even start this problem, I want you to do this. I want you to find that answer. Now, if you have x squared plus h squared, it's wrong. It does not give you x squared plus h squared because this is what it means. It means x plus h times x plus h. So use FOIL there. And when you do that, I'm just giving you the final answer, okay? X times x is x squared. X times h is xh. H times x is xh. And when you have xh plus xh, you get 2xh plus h squared. Now, if you know the shortcut to that, you didn't have to do FOIL. Okay. Guys, that's a hard, other than this being long. Yes, this is a long process, but most problems do not take this long. And you definitely will see it on your test, and you definitely will see it on your final. And I'll guarantee you, you'll get one that looks like this versus the first problem, okay? Now, the steps are the same. The only thing is this became harder, okay? This part became harder because of an x squared. But you all can handle it. Because here's what you're going to do. Step 1. Find your f of x plus h. What that means is you take out your x and you put in x plus h. So that means 2 times x plus h squared minus 3 times x plus h plus 8. Okay. Now, order of operations, you do parentheses first. That means you have to do this. Well, didn't we just do that over here? Yeah, that was the hardest part to this. So you really have 2 times x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. I'm not going to distribute this 3 yet. You could have. All right. If the next problem I see is people somehow skip a step, and when they distribute the 2, it's just a careless mistake. But now you're going to distribute and you get 2x squared plus 4xh plus 2h squared. Now distribute the -3. We get -3x minus 3h plus 8. Will anything cancel? No. All right. That was step 1. We got 2 more steps. But after step 2, at the end of step 2 is what I like. Okay. You just have to be careful. You take your answer from step 1 and you subtract this from it. That's all you're doing. You are going to take this here, 2x squared plus 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3x minus 3h plus 8. You take that whole answer from step 1. Now again, I'm writing a lot of stuff I would skip. Like I would never rewrite this. I would just go minus and subtract my original from it. My original one was this here. So it's minus 2x squared minus 3x plus 8. Okay, so me, I would have just taken this whole thing here and put minus that out to the side. And the other thing is, I would just go ahead and do this part right here now. What happens to this here? What does this 2x squared become? The positive or negative? Negative, good, because some of the people will forget that. And this becomes positive. And this becomes negative. Because I'm distributing this. Now I'm going to rewrite everything, which I would never do. I would just go ahead and start canceling. But because I'm teaching it, I'm going to rewrite it. Now, again, a lot of students will just skip this problem because it takes so long. But guys, this is also worth more points than the others. So that just means you'll miss more points because it's a bigger problem. Okay, but here, watch what happens. What happens to our x's, our x squares? They cancel out. I like that. What happens to our 3x? They cancel out. And what happens to our 8s? They cancel out. So now we have this short, and by the way, this was step 2. Okay, step 2 was where we took our f of x plus h, and we subtracted f of x from it. And now we end up with 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3h. That's all it is. And the last step is just divide by h. So you take this 4xh plus that 2h squared minus 3h, and you just divide everything you see by h. For xh. Oops, let's try 4x, right? So step 3 is what we're doing now, where we took our answer of step 2 and we divide by h. So we get 4x plus 2h minus 3. Guys, I'm going to tell you, do not worry about rewriting any of this graph. Don't worry about it. Just put it. Now that kind of took a long time to do, didn't it? But let me show you how fast I can do it. Because this is the 3 steps. This is how teachers teach it. but let me show you how you can do it. And just watch, okay? You don't need to do. So let's say I change the problem to f of x equals, I don't know, 3x squared minus 2, let's do plus 2x minus 5. I don't know, just making it up. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I am going to do the f of x plus h. Well, that just tells me that I'm going to plug in that x plus h squared plus, this is how I would do this if I was making my answer key up. Okay, notice I don't skip that any steps yet, because here's what happens. This gives me x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. If I skip that step, I'm going to miss, I can't skip too many steps, okay? So basically, because I already know this, x squared, multiply these together, get xh, multiply by 2 and get that, and then square that. Plus 2, this is the longest part to this whole process, minus 5. All right, so now I'm going to get 3x squared plus 6xh plus 3h squared, because I'm distributing this, plus 2x plus 2h, because I'm distributing this, minus 5. Okay, that was long, right? Because it took longer than 20 seconds to do, right? So now my second step is to take this answer and just subtract this from it. So what I would do is on my paper, I would do this. Okay, that didn't take long, did it? Now on my paper, I'm like, oh, I'm going to distribute this. So I get a negative 3x squared minus 2x, and that's plus 5. And now watch what happens. These cancel. Oops. There we go. The 2x's cancel and the 5's cancel. So I'm left with that 6xh plus 3h squared plus 2h. And now I just divide by h. 6x plus 3h plus 2. See, I can do it shorter, but I need to go through these steps to, you know, I don't want to skip steps, but you can. First part though, I would never skip steps on that first step, because that x plus h is where it gets everybody. They look at it and go, but if you learn every single time I've done this, haven't I? That's telling you what x is equal to. You shouldn't have a problem. Okay. On Wednesday, we will finish everything else in homework 12 up. We will review on Friday, and then your test will be on Monday. Okay. Questions? Okay.